live now. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
This is Dino Pati Jalal. This coming from the Office of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. And I want to thank all the panelists who are here today to discuss a very interesting topic, which is what is the impact of the collapse of oil price to Indonesian economy. I want to thank the panelists because of them now I have to wear my proper clothes and get out of my sandals, my shorts, and my t-shirts. All right, and I'm very happy that we have a very good panelists today. First, we have the best looking politician in Indonesia, Mr. Sandiaga Uno. Yeah. All right. And that title used to belong to me. I used to be the best looking politician in Indonesia, but I quit politics. So now that throne has been taken up by Sandi. Right. Thank you, Pak Sandi. It's always good to see you. And I look forward to one-on-one challenging you on a basketball court where I hope to score some points.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, he's very good actually. All right. And second, we have Pak Susilo Siswo Utomo, who was the former Deputy Minister for Mines and Energy. Yeah. This was during the colonial times before 1945. I'm just kidding. And he is an expert on energy issues and a very pleasant person. I've known him for a long time, worked with him, and so on. And
thank you, Pak.
It's a great pleasure to have you. And he's also a commissioner at PGN Saka Energy Indonesia. And lastly, we have the Director and CEO of Medco Energy, Mr. Roberto Lorato. He's Italian. He works for an Indonesian company, and I've known him forever, I think, right? I think I met you before I got my first daughter, right? So that's like 15 years ago, right? A long time. So Roberto is actually an Indonesian at heart, right? He just sounds Italian, but he has a lot of love for Indonesia, and he is also an energy expert that I consult from time to time to ask him annoying questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to give the floor to Pak Sandiaga Uno to talk about how do you assess the collapse of the oil prices and its impact on the Indonesian economy. I think the oil price today was about 34, 35, if I'm not mistaken. And this is well below the assumption of the government budget, which is about $65 for this year. Is that right? 65, yeah. And we know that despite the lowering of the oil price on the streets, the harga BBM remains the same. Right, but we also know that a number of upstream oil industries, energy industries have been frozen as a result. Some say this is a must, and some say it should be the other way around. It should be kept going. And I would also like to get your sense on how the decline of the oil price will affect the fate of other commodities in Indonesia. So with that introduction, I will let the best looking politician in Indonesia to give us his thoughts. Yeah. Please.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Pak Dino. And I would really like to welcome to play post-COVID basketball protocol with you, whereby we cannot guard each other. We have to be 6 feet apart, and the only way to score is just by shooting a 3-pointers. So I have prepared a very simple slide because the expert is here. The experts are here, Pak Susilo and my good friend Roberto. But if that slides can be shared, I think the impact to the economy is unprecedented. And if you look at this COVID-19 and actually the oil war, it's actually happening at the same time. So there are two black swans event happening, coinciding side by side. So we need to really cope not only with the outbreak, but the what started as a oil and gas war between Russia and Saudi Arabia that brought something that I have never seen in my life, at least in my young life. I've never seen an oil went into negative. In 1997, Roberto, Pak Susilo and Pak Dino would remember that oil price went down, Brent went down to $7. But I have not seen future went into negative territory. So the next slide, very quickly, this is the impact of the economy. We hope that it will be the first line of blue with the right macro measures. And I think we had initial fumble of policies, but since the last, I guess, 30, 45 days, we're putting more macro measures in place. I hope it will be handled much better on the health front, and then we are slowly transitioning to relaxations and relaxing some of the social limitations, the large-scale social limitations. So Ibu Sri Mulyani went to the public yesterday with a staggering different number, which made everybody's quite surprised that we were looking at a budget deficit of 5.07%, and suddenly we are already at 6.2%, and a staggering amount of the, I guess, the budget that we need to fund through reallocations and other measures. Next slide. This is, I probably would yield the discussions more to Pak Susilo and Roberto, but other than the oil and gas war between Russia and Saudi about the output, it's actually about demand. It's not only supply that will receive an exogenous shock, but also the demand. There will be recession is already in place in Japan, US, China, all the big developed economies, and the consumptions will dip significantly. And the supply, of course, we have a deal now that brought the oil price back to at the $30 level range, but it is fragile. It is a lot of politics come into play. So it's too early to tell whether this is sort of like the new normal, the base of $30-ish price of oil, or we will see some more volatility going forward. Next. I think more players seeking. I used to be in investments, and one of our investments is also in oil and gas, and we're still some minor investments in oil and gas. But there are exit strategies now. Actually, some of the world's biggest oil producers are running out of time to balance the market after the outbreak crush demand. The number of rigs operating in, I'm watching the Baker Hughes number is actually slashed by 50% already, but still supply is at high level. So we're seeing economic contractions, decisions from OPEC plus and non-OPEC supply, lower demand from non-OECD, coronavirus, probably second or third wave, and price war. So this is like a perfect storm for this industry. But we have gone through this before. The oil and gas sectors have always been able to adapt. And I am quite optimistic that they will always be able to adapt. The next slide is more of my wish, not of current situations, but historically, outbreak will always end. Demand will always go back to the same level, and we always wish or hope for a fee curve recovery, and Indonesia should learn from this two black swan events having occurred at the same time in terms of increasing storage capacity. I have been informed that we have not really strategically increased our storage capacity. This is probably an opportune time while the oil price is more affordable. In terms of people on the street, yes, they are complaining because prices of everything, not just oil, seems to be very high. In particular, food prices. So we need to make sure that we strike a very good balance in terms of how the national policies will take place. Politics should step aside a little bit. This is a time for really rational policy making in terms of how we could shape the future of oil and gas business. I think CapEx will be reduced. Roberto will know much better than me. My guess is about 50 to 60%. Cost efficiencies will be really the name of the game. People will bring down the cost per barrel to a new low. I would suspect that OPEC will be minimized to 20 to 30%. And hopefully once the supply side and demand side stabilize, we're going to see oil price probably hovering slightly north of the current level. But the new normal looks like something with a four handle, $40 barrel of oil per day. So that's it. Actually, my last slide is to challenge Pak Dino Patijalal for not basketball. Post-COVID, we are going to do a run together, Pak Dino, and hopefully it will be this time not the New York Marathon, but Jakarta Marathon in 2021. Thank you very much, Pak Dino. I pass the mic back to you.
Thank you. And the challenge is accepted. I should tell Pak Sandi that my second marathon was in Berlin. I think this was 2 years ago. And I swear to God, I'm not lying. By the time I crossed the finish line, I had like hundreds of people clapping to me, right? And you know why? Because I was literally the last person to cross that, right? And they had actually taken the finish line sign and everything, right? But at least I finished. I think it was 7 hours or something. Embarrassing because I'm an old man. But Sandy does a marathon in like 3-4 hours, I think, right? So, thank you very much. Now I move to Pak Susilo to give his take on the impact of the oil price collapse to the Indonesian economy. Pak Susilo, the former Minister of Energy and Mines, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mas Dino, Mas Sandi, and also Roberto. Mas Sandi has just outlined his view from political as well as global economic impact of the crash of the oil. But I just would like to focus to Indonesia. What does it mean? From the revenue point of view, there is no doubt that the impact of the crash of the oil price as well as the outbreak of the COVID-19 will severely impact the revenue and also the Indonesian economy. There is no doubt, number one, that the revenue for the government will decrease considerably, because from the export of the oil, because of the tax of that received from the and also the proper come from the profit split, and so on and so on. So because of this price impact, the oil and gas business in Indonesia, there is no doubt gonna be very, very low. There gonna be a lot of production sharing contracts who will be having a very, very difficult to continue production because of not enough revenue, and then the cost will go up because of the outbreak of the COVID, and then there are gonna be difficulties in servicing the debt. Service company will be also severely impacted. There's gonna be a lot of unemployment, and the impact is the government will have a difficulties collecting the tax because there is no activities in the oil business. Those are the kind of impact to Indonesia, and the government will have to do a lot of things to simulate the oil and gas industry. And a lot of people will talk about giving the relaxation of the servicing the debt, and then also providing some incentive that would like to be able to the company to start, and so that the rolling the activities from the oil companies will also can be done quickly. There are a lot of things that we can do. The asset, for example, because of the low oil price, probably it's gonna be difficult for the companies to execute the project. There's gonna be project delay. There's gonna be cutting off the staff. There's gonna be also stop drilling, doing the exploration. When people like Roberto, people like Pertamina stop drilling, meaning that it will not add any additional reserves. Meaning in the future that the production will go down. When the production will go down, then there is no doubt that Indonesia, as we know, is net importer of oil. We also net importer of LPG, and also that there's gonna be a limit of the export of some of the oil that we have. Meaning that there will be increase on the import of crude. There will be increase of the import of the fuel itself. That at the end of the day, it will also impact the deficit. Those are the kind of things that the challenge of the government that needs to be handled. There are also the positive side that when you have a low oil price, we have an opportunity to be able to, let's say, for example, buy the cheap oil and bring it to Indonesia. But the problem is we don't have enough storage. So we cannot take advantage of those low oil prices. So the government and also the private sectors will have to think about how can we start thinking about building infrastructure, whereby when in the case of the oil price very low, we can take advantage by importing or buying the cheap crude and bring it to Indonesia. That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned to you, that the current deficit as well as the deficit is caused by the large import of crude, fuel, as also LPG. The government will need to think about reducing those LPG import. For the time being, they are target spending about 3 billion, I think, a year in 2019. Imported about 6 to 7 million tons of LPG. It will have to be reduced by more or less developing the gas infrastructure in the eastern part of Indonesia, replacing the diesel, and also building, for example, like the city gas. And also, as you know, that some of our 1,700 megawatts of power plant run in Indonesia still burn diesel. It will have to be stopped. Those are the kind of things that we can do, start thinking about building the infrastructure in the eastern part of Indonesia, mainly over there. So in terms of the impact, there is no doubt that the impact of this oil price, hopefully, it's gonna be recovered, or it can be, let's say, solved when the oil price comes to 50, for example. $45 is the threshold, 50. And hopefully right now it's at $35, and hopefully by the end of the year, it's gonna be some kind of level whereby everybody will have to be able to start again. But the problem is, at the present time, there are a lot of small production company which cannot survive. It can go to the Chapter 11, bankruptcy. So those are the kind of things that will need to be government will, and also the opportunity to be able to help them in a way by, for example, like I don't know, the bank, the government bank will, or the merger, the acquisition, and so on, will have to be able to help them to survive in the next 6 or 7 months. Those are the kind of things that I think need to be discussed, need to be implemented. Planning, it's okay, but the execution will have to be executable. Those are my few, but we can discuss some more, and we can also think of others. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just before I move to Roberto, I just want to ask you, last year, as somebody who's in the industry, did anyone predict that the oil price will go this low?
Well, oil protection is nobody predict this kind of low price. The negative WTI, the reason why they do that is most of the major oil fields are old oil fields, whereby the water cut, the total water production is over 96 or 97 or 98%. If they stop production for the time being, I don't think they will lose that whole. They will never be able to produce that oil again. So that rather than stopping the oil, rather than losing the production, or they just tell the people, okay, just take the oil at the for the next 3 or 4 months with a negative. It's just to keep oil flow.
Okay, so now we go to the player in a good way. I mean, right? The person on the front field, which is Roberto Lorato. Please give us your perspective, Roberto.
Dino, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very kind and flattering introduction you made earlier on. And again, thank you to Papa Sandiaga and Papa Susilu, who actually have so well set, I think, the framework for this debate. both in terms of macroeconomic and maybe macro politics, and with Pak Susilo out of his very deep experience and knowledge of the Indonesia oil and gas industry. Now, as a representative of the industry, I thought I would like to give you a high-level view on how a company reacts to challenges of this nature. And yes, Pak Sandiaga was very right to say that these are two black swans who appeared at the same time. And yes, no one expected, by definition, to see oil price collapse of this nature and extension so sudden. So let's have a quick look. I try to give you as pragmatic as possible the description of how the industry saw and how it's trying to react to this situation. Next slide, please. So we had the two global shocks. Global is an important word here, I think, because this is not just a crisis affecting an industry. It's not a crisis affecting a single country either. It's global. So the nature is important. I mean, the fact that it's global is important for us to understand because it does affect everyone and every single industry and every single community in our world for the first time ever, probably. The first global shock, of course, is COVID, with all of this implication, first of all, on communities, people, but then from the industry perspective, what does it mean? It means that demand, manufacturing facilities are shutting down. Demand for energy is collapsing very quickly. It also means logistic disruptions. Logistic disruption brought by the fact that people are being quarantined, transportation is being stopped, supply chains are stretched, and in some cases are being disrupted. Together with that, and at the same time, the low oil price, which is a result, of course, of the COVID crisis, but as Pa Sandiaga mentioned earlier, also the untimely price war between and within OPEC plus. So low oil price immediately, and of this, it's not that the oil price moved from 65 to 50 or 40. It moved from 65 down to 20 in a couple of months. So if you're sitting in a company and you're having to balance your revenues with your costs, the first thing that hits you is your liquidity. Immediately, you have a situation where the profitability, of course, is the headline, but the emergency on a daily basis is the liquidity. And without liquidity, there is no ongoing business. Therefore, what you do, you cut your expenditures. You cut CapEx, you cut OPEX, you cut all that is what we call technically discretionary spending. What you have committed contractually, you cannot cut, but everything else, you will. Medco has done so by, for example, for 2020, reducing our CapEx spending from 340 million to 240, 230. So over 100 million CapEx will be removed, deferred already this year. OPEX will be cut in the short term by 15, 20%. So the percentages indicated by Sandiaga actually were quite close to reality. So those are the shocks we are having to confront, the challenges. What are the implications? As I say, lower demand. Of course, energy players, as a result of the reduced mobility, quarantine, and so on, will reduce and defer demand. Yes, we should start looking for some player opportunity to secure long-term contracts at attractive prices. That's what, for example, some players in the downstream have been doing by taking advantage where they could of the storage opportunities. And yes, it is a pity that Indonesia wouldn't have a much larger strategic storage to count on, because that's what other countries like China have been doing, in fact. On the supply, again, on the supplier side, which are the oil and gas companies and the service companies, the vendors of goods and services, is financial distress and potential bankruptcy that you have to face very quickly. Reduced production capacity and the fact that this disruption in the logistics are occurring means also the lead times between what you intend to do in terms of work plan and what you can actually do tends to expand. You cannot count immediately, some of the people might not be available, crew changes might be disrupted. The supply chain is disrupted. We had, for example, in one of our operations in Thailand, we were ready to commission some new compressors, but we had bought the equipment from China. We need the Chinese engineer to come and complete the commissioning, but they couldn't. They would not be allowed to fly into Thailand. So you have these sort of operational challenges that you have to face. So looking a little bit ahead, what would be the business outcomes that you would expect out of this? Yeah, immediate cost savings. I would call it then cost deferrals. Companies will be looking inevitably to review the cost structure by, where possible, just restructuring the way you work, the way you operate. But of course, you will have to renegotiate longer-term contracts. In this case, because of the peculiarity of the crisis, which is brought by COVID, lead time management becomes a critical factor. We cannot anymore count on lead time between a decision and execution as we would have in normal times, simply because of the logistical disruptions being caused. So that's where the industry is, and that's what the industry in general is trying to do to counter these challenges. Then if we try to put this in the context of Indonesia, then you have to ask yourself, okay, how does the Indonesia oil and gas industry, how is the oil and gas industry in Indonesia positioned today in terms of competitiveness versus other countries? Next slide, please. Well, just look at the right side of the chart. This is not a pretty story. In Indonesia, over the past 10 years, investment in the oil and gas industry has overall been decreasing, while in most of the other parts of the world actually has been increasing. If you remove those countries in the chart that have been affected by social disruptions, by wars and the like, actually most of the other areas in the world, most of the other countries have seen an increase in the upstream investment. Indonesia is one of the few where actually has gone counter to that trend. Why is that? Well, over time, the attractiveness of the economics of the upstream in Indonesia have deteriorated. So without going into many details, but I would say obviously fiscal terms have not kept pace with the reforms that were brought by in other countries. The regulatory system, notwithstanding a lot of efforts have been made by the government, by SKK Migas to streamline those regulatory system, is still quite lengthy and complicated when compared to other countries that compete against Indonesia for capital in the oil and gas. And then I think a third element is the uncertainty. Far too many changes have occurred in the regulatory environment in too short a time, which have dented, reduced the level of comfort, the level of assurance the investors are looking. Changes have to be occur. In our life, we're always trying to change. We're always trying to do things for the better, and therefore change is a must. But in an industry which has a high risk profile, huge investment profile, and longer time between exploration, when you risk your money, and production, where you're able to harvest your returns, throwing too often, changes, contractual changes or regulatory changes that actually disrupt the natural flow. However, next slide. The oil and gas in Indonesia remains a big component, a big contributor to the economy in terms of contribution to the state budget, even though they decreased over years. Now, to me, the fact that they decreased in percentage is probably a good sign. It means that the Indonesia economy has actually grown and diversified and is not as dependent on oil and gas as it used to be 20 years ago. So that is good. However, when then you look at a measure in terms of actual money, well, then maybe the reduction has been a bit too drastic. There were opportunities there where we should have spent investing more and contributing more to the state. And as reminded to us before by Pastor Zillo, the fact that there's an increasing gap between demand of energy and the domestic supply of energy, that means Indonesia is importing more and more of expensive products which can only deteriorate the trade deficit. But then again, this is an industry that is not just about big investment. It's about a lot of people. It's about a lot of highly skilled professionals who do contribute in economic terms, but do also contribute in terms of knowledge, technical knowledge, managerial law knowledge, sophisticated logistics knowledge that once people learn and develop, then can be applied across other industries for the benefit of the country. And so that's why I think oil and gas not only is strategic for Indonesia today, will remain strategic, not just for the products that we contribute, but also for the knowledge that we can develop for the community. A factor that we haven't mentioned yet today is energy transition. People are now debating post-COVID. Isn't that the right opportunity now to move away from the oil and gas, move away from the hydrocarbons, invest everything in renewable? I wouldn't say necessarily not. We are also investing in things like geothermal or solar, but one thing, some characteristics for attracting money also in those investments are the same. You got to be competitive. You need to have a regulatory environment which is simple and you can trust. You need to provide to the investor an environment where there is certainty and stability. And this is true for the oil and gas, as is true for most of the other industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. I really enjoyed your presentation and especially the numbers and the slides that you presented. Now let's get into a discussion. We have a couple of questions from our audience, but let me begin with a question for me as a moderator. This is about the oil price, about the BBM price domestically in Indonesia. in the last 2 months, 8 ASEAN countries have repeatedly reduced their domestic fuel prices. But for us, we haven't done that yet. This is for anyone who wants to answer this. What are the pros and cons of reducing domestic fuel prices and maintaining the current fuel prices? So is that a good move? Not so good, and why? Anyone?
Well, okay. Let me take this. Efforts by the government to reduce fuel prices to support the domestic economy are good in terms of intentions, of course, and are probably also necessary to maintain or to even improve the competitiveness of your country's economy, especially if those fuel are dedicated to industries, manufacturing industry that then will export products. So you need to find ways to supply the economy with safe and affordable energy. Now, the way you do it depends, right? The way you do it is often the trick. If you impose to a supplier who has a contract to reduce his price, well, that is probably not going to help in the long term. May help in the short term, but in the long term, that supplier, that investor will walk away. So the question is how you do it. The intentions, I think, are good, but it's important to find the right way to do it without penalizing those companies who actually have invested to start with in developing those resources.
Pak Dino, hello.
Yes, silakan, Pak.
As you know that you mentioned that other countries has reduced the price of the fuel, and Indonesia looks like remain the old price. Yesterday I talked to Pak Yugi of BPH Migas, who let's say monitor or control the price of the BPM and so on, and also the demand. Based on the latest information is that the demands for fuel is down significantly. I think between 50 to 60%. When you are talking about the price of the BPM, there are several sectors. One is industrial sector, for example, like for the power generation, PLN, and so on and so on. What is the transportation? Usually it's used by people to, or also by transportation, be it sea freight, be it land transportation, and so on and so on. But because of the very, very low demands, it does not have a lot of impact. As far as what now the price, because people is only moving using cars, travel is limited, the motorcycles limited because of this PSBB, limited, movement of the people of COVID-19. So the impact of this lowering the price is not that much. At the same time, Pertamina, who is more or less the major suppliers of the BPM, when they process the crude, they are processing the crude which has been imported for 2 or 3 months ago. And the price of the oil for the time being is up and down. And when we are talking about setting the price for BPM, they have a long-term, let's say, strategy. They are using the weighted average for the year. What is, and that's why when the price of the oil goes up, they cannot immediately just goes up. The factors, the component of the crude price in the BBM price, I think it's about 60 to 70%. The rest is the processing fee, the transportation, logistical fee, and so on. So on. One of the Pertamina's, because of the regulation, is that Pertamina has to do the PSO, the public service obligation, whereby they have to provide all of the infrastructure to be able to distribute and provide all of the fuel required by the people, no matter where they are. Pak Jokowi has already have a one ppm price for all over Indonesia. It costs Pertamina a lot, but at the same time, the other competitors like Shell, AKR, and also the other ppm distributor, they haven't been able to. They have not, let's say, provide or being pushed, being asked to develop some kind of infrastructure. So the cost of the PSO to Pertamina, it's going to be very, very costly. And those costs will have to be included in the price of the BBM. So Pertamina will not be able to just reduce it. And that's why under the you mentioned something, Roberto, about the strategic reserve and so on. Let alone the strategic reserves for the operational reserve itself. The Pertamina will have to do a lot of things by themselves, and then cost them. So the cons of not reducing the price for the time being is the public image, complaint from the people, but it's not much. That's what compared to other countries like Malaysia, Singapore, and so on and so on. You have to remember that refinery in Singapore is using the latest technology, whereby very efficient. Cost per barrels of produce will be much less compared to what Pertamina is doing for the time being, because of number one, it is they have a lot of employment and so on. There are some public application that they have to do. So if Singapore can reduce it right away, then it can be very difficult for Pertamina, the government, to do it. Pertamina representing the government. That's and also based on what the government decision. That's my view. And when the price at the end of the month or 2 months from now reach $60, well, it's just gonna ease up. And then at the same time, in the meantime, well, just be patient for this public complaints and so on.
Pak Sandi, you want to say something on this? Yeah.
You want me to answer as politician or
both?
Well, first of all, it's tough because the government is determining the prices, and there are severe pressures on government budgets as already announced. But I guess politically, it's also very difficult because right now, I guess it's very stable. The president have almost unanimous support from the parliament. But when Pak Sus says that 60–70% will be determined by crude prices, and crude prices have practically halved in the last 2–3 months, we need to basically have explanations to the people. And the Article 33 of the Constitution is actually, if it comes from the soil of our beloved country, it should be for the benefit of the people at large. And lower fuel price is actually is going to help under this very difficult time, whereby price of food is high, price of sugar is high. Everybody, 72%, and this is during, I guess, I was informed that during cabinet meetings, the president is also complaining about the perceptions of 72% of Indonesians that the cost of living is very is a much heavier burden on their life, and if you could reduce through reductions in the fuel price, somewhat helping. But I guess it's government decisions, and right now we need to make sure that Pertamina, who is also going to help to be helped by more equity injections by the government during this difficult time, and it's leadership must decide. I would probably, if I were making decisions, because when the prices of oil is up, you are actually increasing it right away. So this is a couple of months already, and if it's stabilizing at $30 to $40, I would start doing modeling. What type of oil price or fuel price we could make it adjust so Pertamina can still do its PSO. And upstream activity is pretty much not going to be affected, but rather the impact to the people. And if we could lessen the burden to the people, it's going to be, I guess, the right policy decisions.
Thank you for that true politician's answer to the question. I will ask a question from Firman Masudi, who is one of our viewers. He asks, what is the government's initiative to increase storage capacity of crude oil or strategic reserve while the price is low, as highlighted by Pak Sandi? So what is the government doing for this? Anyone want to answer?
I can provide some clue on that. Number one, Pertamina has a very limited storage capacity that will not be able to store all of the crudes that they purchase. For the time being, most of the crudes in the next 2 months delivery is stocked outside Indonesia. That's the things that we try to encourage the government together with the private company to do the major, let's say, infrastructure tankage storage to move it to Indonesia so that anytime they purchase the crude, they can have to bring it to Indonesia. For the time being, the total crude storage that needs to be built, I think about 2.8 million kiloliters. And it can cost several billion. And so that the Pertamina, the existing storage is only available for whatever, several days that used by the refinery. So to straight answer is we cannot do that. Even if you buy the crude at let's say $20, you have to store it in Malaysia, Singapore, and also in the Middle East. Once, for example, 2 months or 3 months from now, or 1 month from now, to be shipped to Cilacap or to Balikpapan, then it will incur the transportation cost and so on and so on. Those are the complexity, and so that's a kind of opportunity for the let's say private companies to do some building together with the government. We have a program together that would like to encourage the government, push the government starting in 2014. I'm not giving up to encourage the government to do this kind of activities by building more and more together with the private company and because of the government, so that in the future, when there is some kind of lower price of oil, then we can bring it to Indonesia. Now, for the time, it's just impossible. That's the question. Yeah.
Okay. I will take a question from Winda Aulia. By the way, if any of the panelists want to jump in, just raise your hand and I'll see you on the screen, which means you want to comment some more. Yeah. Winda Aulia says, "Hi, I'm Winda, working for an oil and energy service company, and I agree that there are operational challenges in remote sites. Do you think that there's going to be a shift in the industry once the pandemic ends? So will there be a shift in the industry once the pandemic ends? Anyone want to tackle that? Please, Roberto.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is referring to. Is a shift towards, for example, a more extensive use of working from home? Possibly that might be one of the results of COVID. Is there going to be a shift towards, for example, logistics? I don't know. It will depend very much. I don't think so much. So will there be a shift, as many people asking today for an acceleration towards investment in renewable energy rather than traditional oil and gas? I think it is a possibility, but again, it will depend whether those investment will be able to offer attractive economics. I mean, there is the same law for every investment. So yeah, that's all I can see from my perspective.
Susilo, please.
I think with this COVID-19, as well as the oil crash, or the price crash, it will force the oil industry to be more efficient. They have to find ways how they work efficiently, less cost, and it will also will have to adopt the safety and also the protocols that needs to be done. During work in the office or in the offshore and so on. There are works that there is no way that you can change that. That is people used to work 2 weeks onshore, 2 weeks or 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Probably they start thinking about 1 month on, 1 month off or something like that. More efficient. So there is no doubt that the service company will have to struggle on that. Those are the kind of adjustment that they have to make. But hopefully when this COVID is over and also the oil price get to normal, hopefully that the oil and gas activities will be picking up. But there is no doubt it will impact because of this decision, like what Pak Sandi and Pak Roberto said, that's going to be a delay in the project approval. So the impact of this going to be some kind of transition in the next 6 months, because some of the big project, the drilling and so on, will have to be delayed to 2021. In Saka also, we delay some drilling to 2021. Some of the development will have to be, let's say, slowed down until 2021, and people doing that. And it will impact also the activities in the service company and so on and so on. And there is no doubt that there is some possible that they have to cut costs. So there must be some kind of adjustment, transition.
Okay, let me ask this question from me. President Jokowi, ever since he came to power, he's always expressed his disdain towards regulation. You know, like over regulation. You know, he's all the time he's saying too much regulations. Let's cut this. Let's cut that, and so on and so on. So why is it now companies are still complaining? Yeah, that the regulation is still not good enough. Yeah. What is the problem there? Are we not fast enough in pushing for this regulation, or is the oil and gas industry have particular, particular characteristics that make it hard to have easier regulation? What is the answer to that? Yeah? And maybe Pak after that one to answer, but please, Pak Susilo first.
I used to be at one point in time together with Pak Dino. I used to be in the system. Okay. One of the biggest problems, Pak Dino, is bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, because the eco-sectoral that doing the industry, that the complaining by the IPA or complaining by the industry is about the slow process approval. If everyone in the industry and also the government, whoever they are, put the country and the business number one, then in fact it can be done. Because, for example, I keep telling my friends in SK Chemicals, I'm sorry to say in SK Chemicals because I used to be there as well. Their job is very, very easy. Number one is just instruct the production sharing contract to do. Number two is just, speed up approval. Make it easy. Because those are the kind of things that will help the industry, the activities in the oil can rolling and rolling. At one point in time, to drill well required about 1 year for approval. Now, if you can do it, in 2 months, you're talking about saving the 10 months of Roberto paying their people for 10 months, because under operating expenses, it's going to be cost recovery. So those are the kind of efficiency that needs to be done. So speed up the approval, make it easy, transparency, and so on and so on. The government has do a lot of effort to cut the red tape and so on, but still too much, still too many that will hinder and slow down the execution of the project and also activities whereby the money is there. The money is available under work procurement budget. We have so many millions or many billions that have to be spent, but when it comes to request for approval for spending, it's slow. So those are the kind of things that hopefully it will be, and this future post-COVID-19 and post-crash, there is no doubt that the government need to speed up all the approval, cut down the red tapes, the approval, and so on. And between the ministry, they'll have to work together, because some the approval is not only from one ministry, but from several ministry, and the government is very serious, then will have to be done quickly. That's what my view.
Andy?
I was part of the government as well, and coming from the private sectors, I had really large agendas to streamline some of the bureaucracy. And I saw it with my own eyes that bureaucracy really stifle what reforms that you are trying to make. And it's just system. It's not a particular person, it's a system. It's a way for them to save their own job, their own perks, and sometimes it takes leadership to just I would do the dramatic way of moving from the regulations to supervisions, whereby we not just cutting down regulations, but we move forward for more supervisions. For instance, you mentioned about what to do in terms of this impact on the oil price crash on the storage capacity. We have been talking about this for so long, how to increase the storage capacity, and the economics really make sense. But the approval, the permits, local level, central level, it's really mind-boggling. And for players who are like Roberto, who invest in other part of the world, continue to scratch their heads. Why are we shooting ourselves in the foot? If we move towards more supervisions and less regulations, you would see companies have the incentives to invest in increasing the storage capacity, not just SOEs, but private sectors as well. And this is very interesting because if you increase the storage capacity, if you increase the refining capacity, see, lower oil price, it should be actually good for Indonesia because we are reducing our import. We import right now about 350,000-ish barrel of crude oil per day, but the state revenues is low. So we need some kind of a more innovative way to look at it. Increased capacity, increased storage may not be here, so why don't we buy storage capacity outside? You know, everybody is probably full, but there will be time while we're waiting for the national storage capacity to go up, we acquire storage capacity elsewhere. So when there's another exogenous shock for the oil prices, we could take advantage. And this is something that you should not waste a good crisis like this. The questions from Nurlida clearly says that, hey, we have seen oil prices, people expecting to be $200. At one time, it reached $100, $120. What happened to the oil and gas industry? They change. They adapt to change. Shale oil came to play. More technology, fracking technology came to play. And this is how the industry is adapting. And this time will be no different. The industry will be adapting. I've seen some of the very great thinkers, good minds in the oil and gas industry. There'll be technology coming in, and we'll see this new normal or new realities being adapted quickly by the industry, and I'm quite optimistic.
Thank you. I love that quote. I hope I can borrow it. Don't waste this crisis. That's a good quote. And also regarding the bureaucratic, I think all the panelists agree that that is a problem. And I think the reason why red tapes are so difficult to get rid of is because it makes bureaucrats feel important, one. And secondly, it facilitates under the table dealing for government officials. And I think I know this because I used to be in government, right? And I used to see a lot of this, right? We now have a question from Ian Karunia Krishnanda Setiaji. It's a long name. I think there's one person or four persons, I don't know. The question is, hi, I'm Ian, media analyst. Given the recent situation, do you think this is a perfect moment to invest more in renewable energy? Will this become a new trend in the future for other countries as well? Anyone want to take this up?
I would say, yeah, before Pak Sus, maybe very quickly from me, yes, indeed. And I think a lot of oil and gas companies have already branched out to new and renewable energy, solar, wind, and the technology has bring the cost down. It becomes, whether it will wipe the oil and gas industries, I don't think so. We will see this new and renewable energies go side by side. And I guess the energy mix will need to change also, because people start realizing that Jakarta, hey, we have blue sky, the air quality is much better. I'm a runner, I'm an outdoor runner. I see air quality index of Indonesia, Pak Roberto, is green now, of Jakarta, for the very first time, for the longest time. So
Good.
yeah, I think yes, it's a good time to invest in clean energy.
Yeah, developing the new and renewable energy, there is no doubt it will have to hand in hand and together with whatever activities in the oil and gas business. Because under the energy plan is that the energy mix, like Mas Sandi mentioned, it's, for new and renewable, it's in year 2025, it's supposed to be between 20%. And, investing in renewable energy using our own resources, it's gonna be very, very good for Indonesia. And I think it has been studied, for example, like use of biodiesel, use of the solar, use of the geothermal. Geothermal is increasing for the time being. Medco has done, Sarula is a good project, and they have started eGen as well, and so on and so on. So, and also it will provide some kind of, different alternatives for the energy for the people. But providing the electricity, as well as encouraging the local community to start using their available resources in their area to provide their own needs, so that it will not depend on the fuel only. For example, like when they are talking about providing the electricity, providing for the pumps, for the water, and so on, they can use whatever energy available. So I think it's good way, and the government has provided some kind of incentive to do that, and then hopefully that it will be good in the future.
Okay, I have a question from from Rahmat Abdullah. Would there be interest to have partnership with Singapore or Malaysia to build capacity on the storage and refinery capacities? Maybe Pak Susilo is on that.
Definitely, because Singapore and Malaysia has provided, as they built a lot of storage, and they have been used by us, and then there are a lot of companies very, very interested to develop infrastructure storage in Indonesia. The government will have to open it up. We have some kind of ways to do that at no cost to the government, by providing some kind of an area, bonded area, whereby a storage tankage company can do not only servicing on the storage, the crude for Indonesia, but also for others. So the cost of storaging and so on, it can be shared. For example, that when we need, Pertamina can do that as well, just by leasing some of the capacity. So that is always a way, and then we try to encourage the government. We have been talking to DPR, we have been talking to BUMN, and so on, and but right now it's very, very slow. And yes, definitely that we will be able to collaborate some others, because we need to at least to add 2.8 million kiloliters of fuel for crude, and several million kiloliters for BBM as well, so that when anything happens under emergency, we can use that. And in Indonesia, if we store our crude that has been purchased outside Indonesia, when something happens, the blockage, we are dead.
Okay. Next question is for Roberto. This is from a journalist, Ahmad Sadewa Suryahadi. Hi, I am Sadewa from Harian Kuantan. My question is for Mr. Roberto. As the player in the Migas oil and gas company, what's the impact of weakening oil price on Medco's performance?
Well, thank you for the easy question. As for every company, of course, if your revenue stream is reduced because the price at which you're selling your output is reduced, obviously you suffer immediately in terms of financial performance. Now, in a case where the oil price moved from 65 in January to 30, 35 now, even after some recovery, of course you would expect that in the short term, the financial performance will be affected. So the question is, what do you do in order to counter that? If your margins are being squeezed because the oil prices are so much lower, then in order to recover margins, you need to reduce your costs. Therefore, in the short term, again, you defer costs which you may not need to incur immediately to preserve your liquidity and margins. In the longer term, you need to find ways to be more cost efficient in case those oil prices will not go back to the 50s or 60s, which is quite possible. I would tend to agree with Pa Sandiaga that if not 30, but probably 40, 30 to 40 is probably going to be the new normal to look forward. And I would certainly agree with what said earlier Pa Susilo, that the industry will have to adapt and transform itself to become even more cost efficient. The difference today against the latest crisis that we faced in terms of oil prices, which was in 2014-15, not many years ago, is that we were able to extract a lot of cost savings by rationalizing supply chains, logistics, and so on. Now, but then we moved from prices which were 100 down to 60. Now, from 60 to 30 or 40, there is not much room to play there. So I think it's going to be down to two main components. One will be new technologies and possibly new aggregation between companies. Maybe we will see more M&A happening in the world. Number two, it will be, but that will be a choice of the individual countries. Individual countries who work to protect their industry, they will have to provide a framework, a regulatory environment which is more competitive. So I'm not a proponent of less strict regulations. Okay, to me, strict regulations on safety, emissions are important. They should even become stricter over time. But the question is, there is still too much red tape, for example, in Indonesia. It still takes too much time to approve an investment. Studies done by the industry a few years ago showed that between exploration success in the Gulf of Mexico and first production, it takes 3 or 4 years. In Indonesia, it takes 10 years. So look at those parameters and find ways to close that gap. And that will give a big improvement to the players.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. I didn't realize it takes so long, 10 years. Okay.
Yes.
We have a question from Farid Hadiaman. He says, I think the blueprint of energy resilience is not working. Where is DEN, Dewan Energy Nasional? Yeah. So anyone want, maybe Pak Susilo is more appropriate. What's going on?
Well,
where is
Dewan,
DEN?
Dewan Energi Nasional, as you know, that they develop some kind of a strategy and then fix, for example, the energy mix and so on. But they are not the executioner. They are not the executor. They are the strategists. And at the end of the day, the government is the one that will implement all of the program which has been put into the RUN and then the Strategi Energi Nasional and so on. So again, it is the implementation, and also whether you have some kind of budget and so on, so on. I know that they are working. I know that they have provided some numbers, but numbers will not means a lot if it is not realized. The Ministry of SDM and also the players and also the other ministry stakeholders will have to work together to realize the real program that will have to be implemented based on what the energy strategy is set. So, for example, like original plan in 2022, the composition of geothermal, for example, they try to reach about 10% or something like that, requiring about the development of geothermal at least 600 megawatts per year. In reality, only less than 100 megawatts per year has been realized. So between plans and execution, there is a big gap. And it happens, not only on that, but on every, more or less every level. And those are the kind of challenges that we have to work. Anybody know?
Thank you. We have only about 7 minutes left, and before we close, I will ask the panelists to have their 1 or 2 minute closing thoughts. But let's take the last question from Ananda Idris. He asks, a sound and long-term energy policy would be required to manage these issues. Would a new energy law be in the making by the present government, or do we need one? So do we need a new energy law, right? Pak Susilo, and I don't know if Pak Sandi or Roberto want to just raise your hand.
Pak Ananda Idris, I think we know all that the law number 11, 2001, 2000 is being revised and still, back and forth between the government and the DPR, and that's the draft has been, prepared, has been reviewed several times, but the reality of when it will be reviewed and when it will be finalized, we don't know. And I think that's the challenge. People in the DPR and also the government thinks that the new law will have to be enacted. And the question is when, because people for the time being is still waiting, what kind of new regulation, new law, and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be hopefully before the DPR and the government are making up their mind, they have to listen to the input from people like Roberto from IPA, and also who are, implementing, who's executing the law. Because otherwise it will be back to square one again, that it's going to be very difficult to increase the reserve, the red tapes, and so on and so on. Pak Sandi, monggo.
I am so not optimistic about the expediency in terms of introducing new law under this very busy legislative sessions going forward. You have a lot of laws already, and I guess there are some also political challenge if you don't do it with the right timing, and I guess you don't have a good sponsors of the bill moving the pieces around between the government and the parliament. So I would work with whatever we have at the moment and try to push as much as possible, and only make because if you have the law, then it will take more years to have the implementing regulations, and then you have more regulations, and then there's all this overlapping issues that you have to face, and then you have Roberto getting skinnier and skinnier every day. The content reporter asks, how's the outlook of the performance and the profit? We just look at Roberto. He's getting skinnier and skinnier. It's getting leaner and leaner. So I hope the best, Roberto. This is probably the toughest time for all of us here in the oil and gas industry.
Good. And I can also add that your goatee is longer and longer, Pak Sandi.
This is only for Ramadan.
Okay.
Well, I will invite both of you to my ultramarathon Jakarta Bandung then. 200 kilometers, Mas.
Okay. So we have come to the end of our session, and I would like to invite each one of you to give your 1 or 2 minute closing thoughts before we end this wonderful session. I will start with the first panelist, Pak Sandi.
At the end of the day, we need to ensure that we assisted these transitions of the new normal for oil and gas business, in particular to save jobs, because we have thousands, if not tens of thousands, and if you count the multiplier industries below the services, all the other sectors that is being impacted by oil and gas, there are probably hundreds of thousands of jobs. So you need to save those jobs. And this is very difficult and tough time. So we need to put our heads together, stay positive, and keep being optimistic. And this too shall pass. I think let's take our calm in the storm and make sure we go out. A wise man says that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So if you survive this, hopefully our oil and gas industries will be stronger post this 2 black swan events. Thank you so much.
Okay. Pak Susilo.
Well, thank you, Mas Dino. I think the role of the oil and gas industry in the Indonesian economy is no doubt it's very big, and the current happening of the oil price crash, as well as the COVID-19 will force those who are the stakeholders and playing on the oil and business. We have to think, we have to be more effective, we have to be more efficient, and also that they have to adjust for the new normal because of this kind of things. Less revenue, less profit. They have to adjust for adjusting their strategy and so on. So on. At the same time, the government will have to think about how can they still, maintain and also push and encourage the oil industry to be active, because it's going to be very, 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 very important. And also how to think that the hope that they will also think about the speed up of the approval, helping together with the oil industry players to work together to expedite all the activities and projects to bring up the new reserves, maintain also the production, enhancing also the production of the enhanced oil recovery, whatever that will have to bring from the reservoir into the surface for the wealth of the people, and also to provide the energy for Indonesia.
Okay, Roberto.
Right, thank you. Well, yes, I'm trying to become leaner and leaner, because in this very volatile world, that's the only way to survive. You got to be able to run faster and to switch direction, in an even faster reaction mode. Look, the oil and gas is a strategic industry for Indonesia today. It does occupy directly, indirectly, hundreds of thousands of people. And then when you look at the impact on the various sectors, it's huge. It's huge because economy and individual well-being is directly correlated to the amount of energy you make available and the amount of safe and cheap energy you make available. So this industry can still attract investment, increase state revenues, reduce imports, open new jobs, protect current jobs, and therefore reduce also in future the current account deficit. Renewables are a good thing, okay? But what we need to focus that we don't need more renewable energy, we need cleaner energy. And then you need to measure which source really is the cleaner. But I'm optimistic that we'll find ways, as long as we remain, optimistic and pragmatical, as long as we look at what really needs to be done and what can practically be achieved, then I think we can all together work out a plan to move forward. I think at the very beginning, Pa Sandiaga sort of appealed to, I wrote a rational policy making. I would add that in order to make that happen, we'll need a higher degree of cooperation between all players. Cooperation, and if you're facing global challenges, we need, especially today in future, more global coordination than we've seen, I'm afraid, over the last few months in the world. Thank you, and with the occasion, allow me please to extend my best wishes to all of my Muslim friends for the upcoming Eid al-Fitr festivities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. I think that is a good way to end this discussion. I want to thank all the panelists for their very deep insights. And also, it's really a lot of fun to talk to you. And I enjoyed very much. And I want to thank all the viewers who are tuning in to today's discussion. I want to alert you about an event that we will do tomorrow. Can you put it there on the screen? We will have a part of our 6-month economic and political review tomorrow. And we will have good speakers. Obviously, we have somebody from Finance Ministry, Bank Mandiri, Andri Asmoro, Chief Economist. We have Yongki Susilo from Hipindo, Bambang Harimurti from Tempo, and then Ralph Van Doorn, Senior Economist of World Bank Indonesia, and Mashita Kristalin from Finance Ministry. This is going to be a good discussion. We have this every 6 months, and if you want very, what do you call it, authoritative analysis on what you need to know, this is the one I advise you to listen to. With that, I want to thank all our speakers, and the challenges that were made today would be noted. First is the one-on-one basketball between me and Pak Sandi, happily accepted, and then the Bandung Jakarta Ultra Marathon by Susilo Siswo Utomo. That will be also happily accepted by others, but not me. So thank you very much, and let's give a big hand to all of us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Pak Sandi, Pak Dino, and also
Thank you.
Roberto. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
much. Say hi to all the misses.
Yes.
And selamat Hari Raya Idul Fitri.
Selamat Hari Raya Idul Fitri as well, Pak.
Selamat Hari Raya.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
See you tonight, Sandy. Yeah.